We're seeing the same grim data that everyone else is, although we've been seeing that data for about 3 months. We've had 50 analysts covering over 60 countries across 30 data factors since we started doing this, and we have seen continued severe, serious economic impacts, not just in transportation and leisure and extractives and in consumer goods, but virtually across the board, across the United States. I do think that there's some potential good news in the extremely dire and grim numbers that we're seeing emerge, and that is that governors and state legislatures who had initially taken a laissez-faire approach to the virus and to treating the virus are starting to react more quickly in response to the data. So you're seeing that in things like bar closures in Texas and Florida. And we think that that's a good thing because it seems that going big and going fast and listening to the data and being able to move is an effective way of managing the economic fallout here.
Jordan, the tone is in contrast to where we started initially. Some political leaders were talking about not shutting down the economy again, giving the connotation that the shutdown first time was not helpful. But that's in contrast to the data we're seeing, because Sweden was also one of the holdout countries that didn't really go into lockdown, but then you've seen just as bad an economic hit there as anywhere else. So what happens under the second wave? What do we see? Do we see more lockdowns because it does actually help the economy recover quicker?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. So we've actually just put together a white paper on this, comparing the Swedish response, which, as you noted, was really light restriction. I mean, I don't want to say it was like full herd immunity, but it was something similar to the Greek response, which was extremely tight lockdowns that were enforced to the extent that, churches were being monitored. And what we're seeing is Greece emerge from this with at least a stronger retail economy, but also a far fewer death count per 10,000. I think Greece is at 2 per 10,000 as compared to Sweden's 45. And even Sweden's chief epidemiologist, I think on CNBC 10 days ago, said that if there's another wave, another serious wave in Sweden, they're likely to take much more restrictive measures than they did the first time. So we think there's a big, big lesson in that. And both the economic response and the public health response really couldn't be different. There are clear lessons to be learned for elements of the United States that are trying to figure out what the best public policy approach to dealing with the virus is.
Jordan, it does feel as though some parts of the population were very encouraged by the reopening of economies, also by the messages about not locking down economies again. You can see that in very populated areas, even right here in the UK. As soon as the sun has come out, people have hit the beach and there's been very little social distancing. How would a lockdown, even in another major city, whether it's New York or London, be taken?
I can tell you in the United States, it wouldn't be received well. But again, I want to try to be moderately optimistic, not overly optimistic, because being overly optimistic, I think, leads to some market inefficiencies, and it also opens people up to fraud and things like that. And we're still seeing tremendous frailties across the supply chain, right? And tremendous issues valuing assets. But New York is slowly and cautiously entering a reopening phase, as is New Jersey and Connecticut, who have sort of formed this triumvirate of states that are going to do things like quarantine people coming in from hot zones, even inside of the United States, which is a little bit unusual. And they are moving forward with a phased economic reopening, whereas you're seeing the potential for the opposite in Texas and Florida. Where we hope this goes, if we follow kind of the Greek model, is that as we learn more about this very dynamic and very dangerous virus, and I have to say this, hopefully as young people around the world start acting more responsibly and listening to public health guidance, we'll be able to, as countries, take much more targeted policy approaches. So you might see things like brief shutdowns of flare-ups and hotspots, and we're really worried about that in the meat processing industry, for example. And those could continue to affect business supply chain, both domestically and around the world. But I think here at home in the United States, there's very little patience amongst the people for a full economic lockdown. And there's also concern that lockdown has been squandered by policymakers.